Welcome to our YouTube channel, The Alien Tales, and please ensure that you have subscribed.
We built a garden that blooms in both our atmospheres. It's becoming a new world. Scientists said our biologies were incompatible. We proved them wrong, one seed at a time. Now pilgrims come to see what love can grow. Dr. Kira Volkov pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the Etherian ship dock with Station Concordia. 3 years of negotiations had led to this moment. The first peaceful contact between humanity and the gas dwellers of Nephthys Prime. The airlock hissed, and Ambassador Threnody emerged in his environmental suit, a shimmering figure of condensed atmospheric gases contained within translucent biomembranes. Where humans had solid flesh, he had flowing currents of luminescent particles that pulsed with emotion. Dr. Volkov! His voice resonated through the translation matrix, a haunting melody that made her chest tighten. I bring greetings from the wind cities of my world. Kira had studied xenobiology for 15 years, but nothing prepared her for the way his presence seemed to fill the room with impossible colors. His form shifted like Aurora Borealis given consciousness, beautiful and utterly alien. Welcome to Concordia, she managed, her usual scientific composure wavering. I'm honored to serve as your guide during the cultural exchange. Threnady's particles brightened. What she would later learn was amusement. Your atmospheric composition is quite dense, like swimming through liquid starlight. She laughed despite herself. We find your physiology equally fascinating. The xenobiology department has been theorizing about gas-based life for decades, and now we are here, proving theories inadequate before the reality of connection. His form pulsed gently. I understand you study the cultivation of life? Botanical xenobiology. I specialize in cross-atmospheric plant adaptation. She paused, struck by an inexplicable impulse. Would you like to see our gardens? They're nothing like what grows in your windstreams, but I would be honored, Threnody replied, his luminescence shifting to warmer hues. Perhaps you could show me how solid dwellers coax life from static matter. As they walked toward the agricultural sectors, neither realized they were taking the first steps toward rewriting the laws of biology itself. The hydroponics bay hummed with artificial sunlight as Kira guided Threnody through rows of earth vegetables and experimental hybrid crops. His gaseous form drifted beside her, occasionally pausing to examine the plants with what appeared to be fascination. These organisms anchor themselves to inorganic substrates, he observed, his voice carrying undertones of wonder. On Nephthys, our flora exists as drifting consciousness clouds, photosynthesizing from the quantum storms that rage through our upper atmosphere. Kira knelt beside a tomato plant, running her fingers through the nutrient solution. We've always assumed that fixed root systems were necessary for complex plant life. Your people are living proof that we barely understand biology at all. Perhaps, Threnady's form brightened, but your rooted life achieves something ours cannot: permanence, duration. We drift and merge and separate, but we rarely grow old together. Something in his tone made her look up. The translator couldn't convey emotion perfectly, but she sensed a loneliness that transcended species barriers. Is that why you came here? To study permanence? Initially, his particles swirled in what she was beginning to recognize as thoughtfulness. But I find myself drawn to the curiosity that drives your cultivation. You take something wild and help it become more than it was. Like diplomacy, she said softly, taking two incompatible forms of life and finding common ground. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, surrounded by the gentle hum of grow lights and circulation pumps. Then Threnody extended a tendril of his gaseous form toward a flowering vine. May I? Kira nodded, watching in amazement as his atmospheric particles began to dance around the blossoms. The flowers seemed to pulse in response, their petals shifting through colors that had no names in any terrestrial language. Remarkable, she breathed. You're not just observing them, you're communicating. All life seeks connection, Threnody replied, his form now glowing with soft contentment. Even across the vast differences between gas and solid, plant and person. 3 weeks into Threnady's residency, Kira found herself spending every free moment in his company. The other scientists had grown accustomed to seeing them together, the human botanist and the Etherian ambassador, conducting what appeared to be elaborate experiments in atmospheric compatibility. The council grows impatient, Threnody confided as they worked in her private lab. They expected me to conclude that long-term coexistence was impossible and recommend limited trade agreements only. Kira's hands stilled over the seedling she was preparing for another cross-atmospheric test. And what will you tell them? That I need more time, that the research requires deeper collaboration. She looked up to find his luminescent form focused entirely on her, particles swirling in patterns she'd never seen before. The translation matrix remained silent. Whatever he was expressing had no equivalent in human language. I've been thinking, she said carefully, about your people's drift flora. If we could create a hybrid environment, part gas, part solid medium, we might be able to cultivate something that could survive in both atmospheres. Impossible, Threnody said immediately. The cellular structures are fundamentally incompatible. Your scientists have run countless simulations based on Earth biology. Kira lifted the seedling, a hardy earth succulent known for its adaptability. But what if we don't try to make your plants solid or ours gaseous? What if we find a third way? She moved to her experimental atmospheric chamber, a device she'd been tinkering with for years. Inside, she'd managed to create stable layers of different gas densities, mimicking the boundary zones between atmospheres. You want to create a liminal space, Threnody said, his voice carrying the first note of excitement she'd heard from him. A bridge, Kira confirmed. Somewhere that belongs to both our worlds and neither. Together, they planted the first seed in the boundary zone, Threnody's gaseous essence intermingling with Kira's breath as they worked. The seedling trembled in the strange environment, and for a moment, Kira feared it would die. Then the first leaf unfurled, glowing softly with bioluminescence that definitely wasn't terrestrial. The Botanical Council called it reckless experimentation, Kira reported, watching their hybrid seedling pulse with soft light in its liminal chamber. They want me to halt all cross-atmospheric cultivation attempts. Threnody's form rippled with what she now recognized as indignation. My people's high assembly sent similar directives. They believe I've been contaminated by prolonged exposure to solid matter thinking. Their plant, for it had become theirs in a way that transcended scientific collaboration, had grown 3 new leaves overnight, each one exhibiting properties that shouldn't exist. The cellular structure showed characteristics of both gas absorption and traditional photosynthesis, creating something entirely new. We could stop, Kira said quietly. Return to conventional research. Report that biological compatibility is impossible, as expected. We could, Threnody agreed, drifting closer to the chamber. But look what we've already proven possible. As if responding to their conversation, the plant's bioluminescence intensified, casting rainbow patterns across the lab walls. Kira reached out to adjust the atmospheric regulators and felt Threnody's gaseous form brush against her hand. The contact sent electricity through her entire nervous system. I'm sorry, he began to pull away, but she didn't move her hand. Don't be. She turned to face him fully. I've been wondering, when you touch the plants, are you actually making physical contact? Or is it something else? It's... Threnody's particles swirled uncertainly. Your language lacks the concepts. It's contact, but not as you understand it. We share essence. Merge briefly with their life force. Show me, she whispered. Threnody hesitated, then allowed his form to flow around her outstretched hand. The sensation was indescribable, like being touched by music, by light, by the feeling of flying. Every nerve ending sang with an alien frequency that somehow felt like coming home. This is why they fear our research, she realized. Not because it's scientifically impossible, but because it's changing us into something new, Threnody agreed. Something that belongs to both worlds. Dr. Harrison Webb, director of xenobiological research, stood before the emergency council session with a file full of evidence. Dr. Volkov has exceeded all authorized parameters. Her collaboration with the Etherian has produced biological anomalies that violate every principle of atmospheric compatibility. The holographic displays showed their hybrid plant, now thriving in its liminal environment. The audience of scientists and administrators murmured with a mixture of fascination and concern. Furthermore, Webb continued, psychological evaluations suggest both parties have developed emotional attachments that compromise their scientific objectivity. I recommend immediate termination of the project and separation of the subjects. Kira felt Threnady's form tense beside her, his usual luminescence dimming to near invisibility. They sat in the defendant's section, watching their work being dissected by people who'd never touched an alien atmosphere or felt their consciousness expand beyond species boundaries. Dr. Volkov, Counselor Reeves addressed her directly. Do you deny that your research has deviated from approved protocols? I deny that innovation requires prior approval, Kira replied steadily. Every major breakthrough in xenobiology has required scientists to exceed established parameters. And Ambassador Threnody, another counselor turned to him, your own people have expressed concerns about your extended residency. When will you return to Nephthys Prime? Threnady's form pulsed once, twice. My mission was to assess compatibility between our species. I have found it to be not only possible but transformative. Through unauthorized biological experimentation, Webb interjected. Through the same process that created life itself, Kira shot back. Random combination, unexpected mutation, adaptation to new environments. We haven't violated natural law, we've discovered it. The council chamber fell silent. In the quiet, the soft hum of the atmospheric processors seemed to echo like a heartbeat. You have 48 hours to cease all hybrid cultivation, Counselor Reeves announced. The Etherian delegation will return to Nephthys Prime on the next transport. This collaboration is terminated. As they filed out of the chamber, Kira caught Threnady's whispered words. Then we have 48 hours to prove them wrong. In the abandoned hydroponics bay on Deck 7, Kira and Threnody worked by the light of jury-rigged grow lamps, their hands and gaseous tendrils moving in perfect synchronization. They'd salvaged equipment from 3 different labs, creating a makeshift atmospheric chamber twice the size of the original. If we're only getting one chance, Kira muttered, adjusting the gas mixture for the 10th time, it needs to be spectacular. Their original hybrid plant sat in the center of the new chamber, but now it wasn't alone. Dozens of seedlings surrounded it, some earth native, others cultivated from Etherian drift spores that Threnody had brought in his personal atmospheric supply. The genetic mapping suggests possible symbiosis, Threnody reported, his form shimmering with excitement. If we can create stable atmospheric layers, the earth plants might provide the structural anchoring, while our flora contributes adaptive consciousness. Adaptive consciousness? The ability to modify cellular structure in response to environmental changes. It's how our people survive the quantum storms. Threnody paused. But it requires a form of intimate connection between organisms. Kira looked up from the soil mixture she was preparing. How intimate? Complete biological integration. Shared nervous systems. Unified consciousness during the growth phase. The implications hit her immediately. They wouldn't just be hybrid plants. They'd be a new form of life entirely. Yes. Threnady's voice carried both excitement and fear. And to create them, we would need to merge our own biological processes during the cultivation, Kira finished. To become the bridge between our species. They stared at each other across the makeshift laboratory, both understanding the magnitude of what they were proposing. It wasn't just botanical experimentation anymore, it was evolution in real time. The risk is enormous, Kira said quietly. We don't know what merging human and Etherian biology might do to us, but we know what not trying will do, Threnody replied. Our species will remain forever separate, convinced that connection is impossible. Kira took a deep breath, tasting the mixed atmosphere Threnody had created around them. Then let's plant a garden that belongs to both our worlds. The biointegration process began at midnight, when the station's atmospheric processors ran their quietest cycle. Kira lay on a modified medical bed, her respiratory system connected to tubes that would gradually introduce Etherian gas mixtures into her bloodstream. Beside her, Threnody had condensed his form into the chamber's gaseous environment, his particles swirling in increasingly complex patterns. The initial cellular response should begin within 6 hours, Kira said, monitoring her vital signs on a portable scanner. If my body rejects the atmospheric integration, we'll know immediately. And if mine disperses too widely in your dense atmosphere, I may not be able to maintain consciousness, Threnody added. But the plants, their hybrid seedlings surrounded them, already responding to the changing atmospheric composition. Leaves that had been simple green were now shifting through colors that existed nowhere in Earth's spectrum, while their root systems extended into both solid soil and gaseous medium. 3 hours in, Kira felt the first changes. Her lungs seemed to expand beyond their normal capacity, processing oxygen with impossible efficiency. When she exhaled, her breath shimmered with traces of bioluminescent particles. "It's working," she whispered, and her voice carried harmonics that reminded her of Threnody's natural frequency. Threnody's response came not through the translator but directly into her consciousness. "We are becoming the bridge." By dawn, their biological systems had achieved something the scientists had deemed impossible. Kira's cellular structure now included gas-processing organelles that shouldn't exist in solid matter, while Threnody had developed temporary density fluctuations that allowed him to interact with solid objects. More importantly, the plants around them had exploded into impossible growth. Vines that breathed like living creatures, flowers that sang in frequencies only they could hear, root systems that extended through both Earth and atmosphere like a neural network connecting two worlds. "Dr. Volkov?" The security override on the laboratory door activated, and Webb's voice echoed through the chamber. "Your 48 hours are up." Kira and Threnody exchanged a look that needed no translation. They'd succeeded, but their garden wasn't ready to face the outside world. Not yet. The security team that forced entry into the abandoned hydroponics bay stopped short at what they found. The chamber had been transformed into something that resembled a living cathedral, with towering hybrid plants that seemed to breathe light and sing in languages no human had ever heard. At the center, Dr. Kira Volkov stood beside Ambassador Threnody, but they were no longer quite the same beings who had entered the chamber 3 days earlier. Kira's hair now held streaks of the same bioluminescence that pulsed through the plants, while Threnody's gaseous form had achieved a stability that allowed him to maintain solid contact with the growing things around them. "My God," Webb breathed, his usual hostility replaced by wonder. "What have you done?" "We've proven that life finds a way," Kira replied, her voice carrying new harmonics. "Across species, across atmospheric barriers, across every limitation we thought was absolute." The plants around them responded to her words, their bioluminescence intensifying in patterns that suggested complex communication. Webb's security team lowered their weapons, transfixed by the impossible garden that had grown in defiance of every known law of biology. "The Council will never approve this," Webb said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The Council doesn't need to approve evolution," Threnody replied, his form now stable enough to touch the flowering vines that had wrapped themselves around the chamber's support pillars. "It simply happens when the conditions are right." A soft chiming sound filled the air as one of the hybrid plants released a cloud of luminescent spores. They drifted through the atmosphere, visible to everyone present, and when Webb inhaled them, his eyes widened with sudden understanding. "They're not just plants," he realized. "They're aware, conscious. They're trying to communicate. They're trying to teach," Kira corrected. "Every spore carries the genetic memory of how to bridge the gap between solid and gas, between human and Etherian. They're spreading the knowledge of biological integration." Outside the chamber, alarms began sounding as the spores reached the station's main atmospheric systems. But instead of contamination, they brought transformation. Crew members throughout Concordia began reporting enhanced respiratory capacity, improved atmospheric processing, and strange new dreams filled with music and light. The garden had begun to grow beyond its boundaries. 6 months later, Station Concordia had become a pilgrimage site. Representatives from dozens of worlds came to study the hybrid garden that had grown throughout the station's atmospheric systems, transforming the sterile environment into a living ecosystem that belonged to multiple species simultaneously. Kira walked through the main botanical corridor, her transformed biology allowing her to tend plants that grew in atmospheric conditions that would have killed her original human form. Beside her, Threnody maintained his new semi-solid state, his consciousness now able to anchor itself in both gaseous and solid matter. The Terran Council has approved the construction of 3 new integration stations, she reported, checking the growth rates on a cluster of Earth-Etherian hybrid fruit trees. And the Nephthys Assembly has agreed to provide atmospheric cultivation specialists. 17 species have requested botanical exchanges, Threnody added, his voice now naturally harmonizing with her human speech patterns. They want to learn how to bridge their own biological incompatibilities. They paused before the original hybrid plant, now grown into a towering tree whose roots extended through both soil and atmosphere, its branches reaching into multiple atmospheric layers simultaneously. At its base, a small plaque read, "The first bridge between worlds, grown from love, tended by hope. Do you ever regret it?" Kira asked, touching one of the tree's luminescent leaves. "Giving up your original form for this?" Threnady's particles swirled in the pattern she'd learned meant amusement. "I didn't give up anything. I became more than I was." He gestured to the garden around them, where human and Etherian children played together, their laughter creating harmonics that made the hybrid plants sing. "We all did." A delegation of crystalline entities from the Andromeda Relay had arrived that morning, hoping to study the integration techniques for their own silicon-based biology. Tomorrow, representatives from the Gas Giants Federation would begin talks about establishing similar gardens in their high-pressure atmospheres. "The universe is becoming more connected," Kira observed. "One garden at a time, one impossible love story at a time," Threnody corrected, his form brightening with joy as their transformed children ran past, laughing in languages that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. 5 years after the first hybrid seed was planted, Dr. Kira Volkov and Ambassador Threnody stood on the observation deck of New Eden Station, watching the latest group of pilgrims disembark from ships representing 47 different worlds. Their garden had become a template for biological integration across the galaxy, proving that love could indeed overcome any barrier evolution had erected. "The Quantum Collective wants to establish a garden in their probability matrices," Kira said, reviewing the morning's requests. "And the hive mind territories are interested in plant-based neural networking." Threnody, now permanently stabilized in his hybrid form, gestured toward the viewport where their original station, Concordia, glowed like a green jewel against the stars. The entire structure had been transformed into a living ecosystem, its hull covered with hybrid plants that could photosynthesize in the vacuum of space. "Every species we've worked with has found something they thought was impossible," he mused. The crystalline entities growing plants in silicon substrates, the energy beings cultivating consciousness flowers, the machine intelligences developing organic digital hybrids. Their own children, biological impossibilities who existed as both solid and gaseous matter, played in the station's central garden with youngsters from a dozen different worlds. The sight of them growing up together in perfect harmony had convinced even the most skeptical scientists that biological barriers were simply challenges waiting to be overcome. "The xenobiology textbooks will need complete revision," Kira laughed, watching their daughter phase between solid and gaseous states while playing with her crystalline friend. "Everything we thought we knew about species compatibility was just the beginning," Threnody finished. "The first chapter in a much larger story." A new ship appeared on the horizon, angular and beautiful, carrying representatives from a species they'd never encountered before. Whatever biological impossibilities they brought, Kira and Threnody were ready. They had learned that love, applied with patience and scientific curiosity, could bridge any gap between worlds. In the garden behind them, 1,000 hybrid plants sang in harmony, their roots extending through dimensions of space and consciousness that connected every world they'd touched. The universe was blooming one impossible love story at a time. Scientists said our biologies were incompatible. We proved them wrong one seed at a time. Now pilgrims come to see what love can grow.